Hello. Over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to be giving a short tutorial on emotional intelligence. And in this context, I'll be looking at it through the lens of understanding personality. So, a couple of dimensions to this really. I'm just going to talk through what emotional intelligence is and share some relatively current frameworks on it. And then I'm going to move on to a tool, a personality tool, that helps us to break down and think about emotional intelligence in a practical way. My name is Alex Furman. I work in occupational psychology, and I hope this short video is interesting and useful for you. Okay, so a textbook definition going all the way back to the 90s, Mayer and Salovey, who were the academics who emotional intelligence is attributed to, although the idea predates this by some way. And actually, people in the world of psychology had been talking about emotional intelligence really since the 1950s. But nonetheless, there we go. That's a start point. The ability to perceive, access, and regulate emotions to assist thought and promote emotional. So it's this idea of really understanding our own inner processes, through reflection, emotional maturity, understanding what makes us tick as people, self-awareness, all of that sort of stuff. Is really how we see and perceive what emotional intelligence is. And it's become incredibly popular. And it's an idea that has grown since the 1990s and frequently talked about and presented in leadership training and that sort of thing. If you look at journals like the Harvard Business Review, they're populated by large numbers of articles and insights on emotional intelligence. So it's a very popular idea. Okay. So, yes, in terms of predating it, there we go. Carl Jung there, one of his most famous quotes is that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So he's talking about self-awareness, really. And rather than thinking that we're hostages to fortune, actually, if the same events keep on occurring to us, we keep on getting the same bit of bad luck. Um, everybody, if every business venture that we embark on doesn't play out well, or we have a series of negative relationships in our lives, there comes a point where maybe it would be sensible to say, actually, is it them, or is it something which is going on with us? Is that something that we need to look at? And that's really the need where we need to hold up the mirror and go through a process of reflective practice. And by doing that, we grow and develop our emotional intelligence. So this is Daniel Goleman's famous framework that breaks it down into these four areas, and I think quite helpfully gives us something, certainly from a practical application point of view, to think about in terms of the nuances and some of the different layers of this concept of emotional intelligence. It's not the complete picture, and the idea has evolved beyond this. But again, hopefully this is a useful place to kind of find our way into this topic. So self-awareness was what Jung was talking about, really. So this is about understanding ourselves well, having an accurate understanding of our strengths, our weaknesses, our personality, our traits, our values, our attitudes, and our behaviors. So just understanding ourselves, and not on a good day, but also on a bad day, knowing about how your behavior changes when you're under stress or pressure, or if you're dealing with a bit of bad news, for example, how does that play out in your behaviors and how you engage with other people? This is all self-awareness, and it's a bit of a superpower, really. If you have a high level of self-awareness, it's a huge advantage. People with low levels of self-awareness simply aren't aware of the impact that they have on others, good or bad, and that can be a challenge, because if you don't know about it, then you can't improve it, and you can't fix it. So self-management is really what we do with that knowledge. So, for example, if I know that when I'm racing deadlines and under a load of pressure, I become quite grumpy, that's not going to be a great time to then sit down and try and help the children with homework. That won't end well. Um, and that's the point when, you know, the self-management would be, look, children, we're going to have to look at this tomorrow. You know, I need to work through this. There's no point in me trying to do this now because it will end up in a horrible row. So let's do your homework tomorrow. I'm sure your teacher will understand. So that's self-management, you know, and likewise, you know, if you have to, you know, have a one-to-one with a colleague and it's important, you're there to talk about their career, their professional development, all of those sorts of things which will be very important to them, but your head is all over the place again because you're meeting yourself coming backwards again. It's just, no, can you get into a better headspace to have that conversation well, or is it better to have it at a different time when you can be fully present and engaged? So all of that self-management. The other side of the model is about others. So if you think left-hand side is about us, the right-hand side is about others. So social awareness is about understanding what makes other people tick, being able to read the signs and the signals, understanding other people's differences, their own strengths and weaknesses, how they differ to you, you know, understanding their qualities, but also perhaps what their needs are as well. So all of that makes up social awareness, understanding what makes other people tick. And then relationship management is then how we use that and how we put it into practice to build and sustain better relationships. Um, you know, relationships that aren't just about our own perspective or our own needs, but that also take into account perspectives, needs, and differences of others. That's effective relationship management. And again, done well, it moves us beyond the transactional. You know, it's not just about getting something done or working together in a short period of time. This done well is about building high quality relationships over time. So there we are. And again, it's a useful little framework. And in the middle, regulation, it's our ability to manage these dimensions ourselves and others well, you know, and to react and to respond to things as they change. So it's a good start, I think, in terms of understanding what emotional intelligence is all about. But it's only a start. It's a very big topic, and it's just the start point, really. So a little framework to help us perhaps to dig into this in a little bit more depth and again to maybe think about it in a slightly more practical way is when we start to think about different personalities and individual differences. So we are all a bit different, but the whole sort of body of work that sits underneath personality science and large areas of behavioral science looks at the patterns in personality. And there's a fair amount of agreement, not complete agreement, because these sorts of people don't tend to agree on everything, but there's a fair amount of agreement that personality tends to orientate to these five patterns or factors, and hence the five factor model, also known as the Big Five model, also known as the Ocean model because of the acronym that the words make up. So one way of thinking about difference is trait openness. So people who score highly on this tend to be creative people. When they're drawing pictures, those pictures will be all over the place and have lots of wavy lines, and will often like to think that way. There'll be people who will doodle and draw pictures and those sorts of things rather than take notes, you know, and that's their system. That's how they work. So to high trait openness, they tend to be more visual, creative people, but also people who tend to quite enjoy new experiences. So the full name for this is openness to experience. So some people will thoroughly enjoy new experiences, want to go completely different places on holiday, all that sort of stuff. Whereas people who score lower on that will prefer consistency, predictability, and may avoid original or new experiences or places to go and that sort of thing. They might have a stronger tilt towards consistency and predictability. The next factor is conscientiousness. So people who score highly in this trait tend to have a preference for structure. They tend to be self-disciplined, quite detail-orientated often. Well, they're not always, but may again work well with detail. So if high trait openness people are going to be more likely to be artists, highly conscientious people will be the lawyers and the accountants. So structured, self-disciplined, get up early, and like to work within a structure. Will do things properly. Extroversion, one of the more well-known aspects of personality. So people who are highly extroverted and more outgoing, socially active on their Sundays will very happily go to parties, and that's how they will relax with others. People who score lower on this or on this axis are more introverted in their own world and might be a little bit more kind of quiet and reflective. Again, on that Sunday afternoon, would much prefer to be lying down with a book or just strolling around with a dog on their own. So a little bit more in the inner world. Agreeableness. On this trait, people who score highly on this tend to be very trusting, quite keen to please, highly friendly, warm-hearted, quick to trust. People who score lower on this will be a bit disagreeable, blunt, say it as it is, and not really worry too much about the impact on others. So again, quite an interesting personality trait. This, and you might think, gosh, this individual, they really don't like me. What have I done to offend them? Actually, very often it may just be that they are a low agreeableness person, and that they just don't really worry. They what they value is just saying it as it is, and not worrying too much about the impact on others. So agreeableness, there is a theory, and it's a good theory, that emotional intelligence is related to this trait. So trait emotional intelligence tends to be people who score highly on agreeableness. That's part of it. So there may be a relationship. So people who are naturally very emotionally intelligent may be people who also score quite highly on this trait of agreeableness. People who score lower might come across as being a little bit more cold and blunt, ruthless. And the last one, neuroticism. This again, really interesting. Sensitivity to negative emotion. People who score highly on this tend to be more inclined to worry about things. Life's worries. Of course, useful. In a team, because they will be more perhaps aware of possible threats or risks and that sort of thing. So again, you can really see why we've evolved this trait. But when it's at a very high level, it can anxiousness there, perhaps a propensity to over worry that's not helpful, and can be a little bit disruptive, and then when people promote and they take on more responsibility in their professional lives, it can be quite necessary, again, if you score highly on this trait, to put little strategies in play to manage yourself well, learning how to switch off, how to practice mindfulness, how to decompress, so that again, possible risks or things that go wrong don't overly play on your mind. So it's how you put some strategies in place, be that reflective practice or whatever, to manage yourself well. People who are low on trait neuroticism tend to be a bit more resilient, emotionally resilient. Things don't tend to bother them too much. Must be nice. So there we go, the 5-factor model, and it's a useful little framework. And there we go. There's a free test that you can do, personality profiling test. Takes about 5 minutes. I do have a more detailed one if anyone would like it. By all means, if you've got my email address or LinkedIn or whatever, I can send it over to you. It's a bit more thorough. But actually, just to get a bit of a snapshot, it takes 5 minutes. I said you don't need to enter any personal information or anything like that, and it'll give you an immediate result. And it's okay, actually. It compares fairly well to the more detailed, thorough, and paid for alternatives. So for yourself, it's an interesting thing to do. You could also consider, if people are open to this, and it doesn't make anyone overly uncomfortable, you could ask your team to do it. And again, you could just look at, against those 5 factors, where's their similarity and where are their differences. So just in summary, emotional intelligence, it really relates to understanding yourself and others. And then based on that understanding, it's the management of yourself and the management of relationships, based on these subtle nuances and aspects of personality and needs and values. So the management of high quality relationships. And then just in the follow-up, Big Five, or the 5-factor framework, provides an evidence-based framework to examine and discuss differences within teams, but also, again, other stakeholders, your clients, in terms of, where you may think, gosh, this person thinks completely differently to me. Again, it may come down to personality Also within families, loved ones, relationships with nearest and dearest. Again, we're all different. That we all have our personalities modeled in different ways, and understanding that can help us to manage those relationships better. So there we go. I hope that's been a useful little session. And please look out for any more little videos that I'll be doing and sharing via YouTube and whatnot. Thank you very much for coming along.